Good evening, friends.
Good evening.
I'm glad that all of you have taken out time and joined this webinar. We have with us a very what you call experienced HR consultant, Debrata Mishra, Debu as we call him. Debu is a startup advisor, leadership development professional, and a innovation consultant with over 3 decades of experience. He was most recently a partner with Deloitte and has previously worked with Korn Ferry, K Group, Hewitt, Arthur Andersen, and PwC, advising clients in India, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and USA. Debu has worked across various professions in his quest for his new experiences. He started his professional journey in advertising and subsequently progressed across to TV production, journalism, management consulting, EdTech, and HR tech. He lives in Bombay and is active on social media. He's passionate about coffee and cocktails and conversations. So I have requested Debu to come and speak to us on the topic of challenges in the changing role of HR in the coming times. And Debu has gladly agreed for that. And I hand it over to Debu to start the session. And at the end of this, we'll have some questions from all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Subir. My absolute pleasure to...
And before I mute myself, just one thing, I would request participants to, if they have any questions, they can just, type it in the chat box. And I think that will be easier because at that moment, instead of waiting till the end, they can just keep on typing their questions in the chat box. And Subirji, you can take the questions in the end.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So my pleasure to be here. And since almost everyone would have had experience with consultants. Consultants love to talk, and the moment Subir gave me the opportunity to talk, I said, why not? So that's the reason. So it comes naturally. And especially being locked at home, I'm currently in the lockdown in Bombay with my wife. And I don't get to speak much, so this is a great opportunity for me to practice my vocal skills. So thank you so much for inviting me. I would like to structure, and Subir had asked me whether I had any presentation, and over the 30 odd years I've realized that PowerPoint is actually a crutch rather than a tool to use for presentations. So I would prefer to speak and engage in a conversation rather than use slides which take away from the importance of what we are discussing right now. I will talk about 4 or 5 components today. So one is the role of HR. I'll spend some time initially on the role of HR. Then talk about the changing nature of HR in the near future and in the coming years, maybe even in the next couple of months. And I believe that HR will be radically different. Then talk about technology. HR and its interface with technology, how that is going to shape up. And finally, how do we measure, what are the new measures for human resources professionals in the new era, which I call as AC. We had BC, AD, and now there will be AC, which is after COVID. So what are the new measures in the era of AC is going to be the last and final component that I'll talk about. So let's start with the role of HR. I have been an HR consultant for many years now. I think I started in 2002 when I moved over from Arthur Andersen to Hewitt. And one of the first things that I noticed is that, for some reason, for some strange reason, HR has to fight its way onto a leadership platform. And the reason I say this is that the cliched phrase that everybody uses to refer to HR is, does HR have a seat at the table? Now, I feel that that's absolutely unfair. To have an expectation that you get invited to the table is the ultimate achievement for the HR function is a gross injustice which has been meted out to HR professionals. In my view, the role of HR has always been and will remain as enterprise leadership. And in my work with clients and organizations, I've always made this important distinction. Human resources leadership is not a function or a functional leadership. It is enterprise leadership. Human resources professionals need to look at themselves as leading the business and not leading a function. That's one first important distinction that I would make. And the reason I say it is that, you look across any business, any industry, any sector, and I can bet my last penny to say that human resources has the ability to make the largest difference to any P&L that exists in any sector or any industry. And why do I say this? Is because the role of human resources is such. Whether you want to hire people, so the right compensation, the right numbers, the right productivity estimates, what skill sets are required, where will you source those people from? All of that is the specialty or focus area of human resources. You look at performance. Without human resources, line managers or business managers will have a tough time getting performance out of the people that exist in the organization. And finally, the notion of building leadership capability within the organization again falls back upon human resources. So I would compare human resources professionals with the health sector workers in the current crisis. The doctors and nurses and health professionals, they are the first line of our ability to fall back upon and to rely on to take us through this COVID crisis. And that's exactly the case in human resources, because they keep the leaders healthy. Without leadership development, one of my favorite examples in leadership development is, it's like that safety briefing on when a flight is about to take off. It's been a while since most of us have taken a flight. But just before a flight, there is an announcement which is typically made by the cabin crew, which is, ladies and gentlemen, in the case of an emergency, oxygen mask will deploy. And before you help somebody else, use the oxygen mask on yourself. And that's truly the case for leadership, that for leaders to be able to help others, they need to be in a good frame of mind. They need to be in good health. They need to be thinking clear. And that oxygen mask that they can rely on, or who helps them with that oxygen mask, is HR as a function in the organization. So I would compare human resources professionals with the healthcare workers in the COVID crisis. Similarly, any organizational crisis, human resources professionals are the forefront of defense or response. Simple stuff. One of the biggest things that most HR professionals would be dealing with right now is what kind of communication to be sent out across the organization. How to keep people motivated, engaged, calm, and not get flustered. So HR is now playing the role of the marketing function, or managing the communication. When technology has to be deployed, I have a couple of friends who said that for the first time we realized that not all employees had laptops. So procurement of laptops and providing personal computing devices to the entire workforce became a huge requirement. So technology also, HR had to step in and ensure that technology was available for work from home to happen. The third is that when you optimize, when people are being discussing laying off or comp adjustments, again it will fall back on human resources. When work restarts, it will be human resources in the forefront. So the role of HR is enterprise leadership. And layered on top of that is crisis leadership. These are the two roles of HR that I would emphasize as being critical for the new future that we're looking at. The second piece, which is getting amplified now, is that how do we run businesses in a lockdown? So more and more, and I'll borrow a leaf out of the work that I was doing in innovation. The ability to run multi-locational manufacturing from a single location is now feasible. We can use control towers in the cloud, or we can put the manufacturing leadership team in one location who can manage and monitor manufacturing operations in real time across locations across the world. In a lockdown scenario, human resources will be that manufacturing leadership to ensure that employees working from home, distributed locations. So now your office is distributed across every single residence that your employees reside in. Your ability to ensure that productivity levels remain high, the basic hygiene is taken care of. All of those is like manufacturing leadership. You know, your entire workforce is in a mode of distributed manufacturing. So human resources will start moving into the realm of learning or picking up concepts and ideas from manufacturing or industrial automation, from those kind of areas. I also see that the future of human resources is actually the definition of HR is going to change. It is going to become humans and robots. And when we talk about robots, it's also, you know, chatbots or bots of any nature, not just the machine robotics, but any artificial intelligence, chatbots, all of those are also important resources which will be at the beck and call of HR. So it becomes a humans and robots function, not just human resources. And the reason I say it is that as all of you step back right now, you would realize, and which is TCS has already been in the news for taking the call of work from home, permanently work from home for a large component of the workforce. So human resources will be able to not only determine what proportion of the workforce needs to be in the shop floor, in the offices, in the field, and in the work from home kind of a location, but also determine what kind of work can actually be palmed off to these robots, which are bots, robotic process automation, chatbots, AI. So that evaluation, human resources will be asked to undertake. And as we move into, let's say, 6 months or 9 months from now, we will see a lot of jobs being crafted which have a combination of automation as well as the traditional way of doing things. So the definition of HR, the premise that I would like to present today is that it is going to be human and robots, function, because that's a combined productivity of where work gets done. It becomes the realm of human resources. The third piece of big leap or shift which will happen is that human resources will be the new marketing function. And I'll take a couple of minutes to elaborate this. In 2009, I come from a non-HR background. So in 2009, I went for a program at Harvard Business School called Competitive Strategy. And I was lucky to attend the program where Michael Porter was himself, the lead faculty. And one of the interesting things that I realized as the definition of competitive strategy is that competitive strategy is about differentiating yourselves in the marketplace. So you have a product, competitive strategy is to position that product or differentiate yourself compared to the competing products which can fulfill the same functionality or provide the same solution. And the more I looked at it, I also understood that a strategy cascade is not necessarily that you take the competitive strategy and then translate it into HR, finance, and other places. No. If you were to really use strategy, then HR strategy will talk to the talent market rather than the customer market. And here is where the interesting insight comes from. That if business strategy is about differentiating a product or solution in the marketplace, HR strategy is about differentiating the organization in the talent market. So why should somebody come and work for you or your organization compared to all the other options that they have to go and work for? Why should somebody accept a 5 basis points lower compensation, but still come and work for you and not go to the highest bidder, which then becomes commoditized? So that part of the new marketing function of your ability to tell your story to the talent market, your ability to convince people to come and work for you, and your ability to continue to be connected with the people who have worked for you or working somewhere else, but are flag bearers or brand ambassadors for the organization is an extremely important role. And it has, over the years, somehow part of it has been relegated to saying that business strategy will inform what HR strategy is. I say that no. It is, HR deals with a different market, which is the talent market. And these people have minds, every single person that you hire have a choice. They can make a choice, they can exercise a choice. And the ability to influence that choice is a very different ball game altogether. So HR strategy is differentiation in the talent market. That's a third piece that I wanted to talk about. The fourth is that if you have that differentiation piece set out, you clearly define this is the reason why somebody should come and work for us. Then communicating it, delivering it as an experience is the role of the HR function, which is saying that, okay, we promised you that when you come here, you'll realize your full potential. I'm just making up the value proposition or the offering to people to come and work for you. You'll realize your full potential. Then your learning and development, your career paths, your performance management, everything is geared towards delivering that one promise that you have made. So the entire employee experience or crafting the employee experience becomes a sheer role of the HR function. And employee experience or customer experience is again based on the marketing function. And that's why I keep saying that HR as the new face of marketing is an important distinction to make in the new era, because people will talk about the experience that they have had with organizations or the experience that they get with the organizations while they work there. Which brings me to the next component of the use of technology. Sadly enough, HR has always been relegated to maybe the second or third level of importance when it comes to technology decisions. But there is something which is very interesting, which has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, which is changing that rapidly. And let's take the case in context. Zoom calls or video calls. Now, video calls or Zoom calls were enterprise technology earlier. But if you really look at it today, is it an enterprise technology? No, it is consumer technology. So we have had Zoom calls and video calls, which has, entered the consumer or the individual's choice of how to use it first, with FaceTime and WhatsApp video and Facebook Messenger rooms. And now organizations are tapping into that ability. So I'm speaking to you from my mobile phone. I'm pretty sure that there will be many people who haven't logged in into their computers, but are using their personal mobile device to log in and participate in an organizational context, even when they're working from home. So the notion that enterprise technology, which earlier used to be ERP or software, and how it was used and deployed, is changing. Individuals are far more agile in their adoption of technology than organizations are. And you'll find this interesting piece that the cutting edge of adoption of technology is always individuals are at the consumer side, and then it is entering the organizational space. So who is responsible, or who is the custodian of individuals in an organization? It is human resources. So the ability of human resources to look at changing preferences, patterns, and to inform technology decisions is far greater than the enterprise technology guys or the CIOs or the CTOs that are there in the organization, because they are only looking at enterprise tech. Whereas human resources is looking at consumer tech. How do we reach a candidate? Can I send a WhatsApp communication? Can I, appify some of my experiences so that employees can use it on the go? And then enterprise tech comes in saying that, okay, let's build firewalls, security, all of that stuff. So they make life difficult. So consumer tech is making life easy, and enterprise tech is about making life difficult. But that's the shift that has happened in 3 to 4 years. And going forward, HR technology is going to be like an app store experience. So not one single unified, now I'm not aligned to any organization, so I can make this comment. My personal prediction is that the likes of SuccessFactors and enterprise resource planning software their era is over. You know, they're done and dusted. They're not going to last. They will have to adopt, and they'll probably recast or reinvent themselves. But the future lies for standalone apps which are able to talk to each other through an API framework and provide a seamless experience, because it's a device which has interconnected apps. And HR therefore will become like an app store of delivering various services or functionalities and productivity tools through multiple software, which are apps, rather than one enterprise behemoth, which is, you know, built like a gigantic pyramid, which has a top-down cascade. So that's one big shift that will happen in HR technology. And finally, at the end of all of this, what are the measurement criteria which will become important for human resources professionals in the near future? I feel that measuring emotions, or being able to measure emotions, to measure physical well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, and therefore being the custodian of that individual's all indicators of what defines that individual as a human becomes very, very important. So are your leaders thinking straight? Are your leaders taking the right decisions? Are your leaders in the right frame of mind to be able to take the decisions? So all of those will become the kind of measurement which will become prevalent in the near future. Because you know, you will have fatigue. I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and he said that he has a corporate headquarters in the US. So he said that his day starts at 10 in the morning and he goes on till 1:30 early in the morning with back-to-back video calls. And I have known him for many years, and I know for sure that it's just a matter of another week or so before he becomes absolutely stressed out. Now, as a person who's very stressed out, do you think that person will take the right decision? No. So it becomes extremely important for the organization to realize that, you know, this is not a healthy way of continuing to work. And this is where there is another yardstick. So I guess all of us on this call are knowledge workers. One big problem that we suffer as knowledge workers is that we do not have the definition of what is a productive day. So if I asked everyone saying that, can you define what is your measure of a productive day? You have no definition. It will be the number of hours you have worked. So the longer you work, you think it is productive. You assume and you hope that it is productive. So knowledge workers suffer from a definition of a productive day. Who are the people who are working from home? All of them are knowledge workers. So the people who have been impacted the most are actually people who are working from home and who are knowledge workers and therefore have the ability to work from home. A blue-collared worker has no relevance in the work from home context. But that's been the biggest debate that we have had, saying that, oh, work from home is the new norm. No, work from home has been a very old concept. Till the 18th century, everybody worked from home. There was no concept of office till the 18th century. In fact, the separation of an office from a manufacturing location happened only in the 1960s, as recent as 1960s when telecommunication was invented. Otherwise, before that, all the office work also happened on the factory premises. So there was no separate office at all. So work from home is not a new concept, and it is definitely not an all-pervasive concept. It doesn't affect or impact blue-collared workers. And the reason I say this is that, you know, we can glamorize work from home, but we are not discussing the dark side of it, which is the emotional toll it takes. I was speaking to the founder of a women's only networking platform yesterday. And she shared something very fascinating. It's sad, but fascinating, that because of the lockdown, the amount of domestic violence helpline calls have gone up significantly. And these are like women who use that app. So these are, you know, women who are much better off than, let's say, the maid who comes to work at your place. So these are women who are calling in and asking for help because of domestic violence. These are work from home is also taking a toll on family and respect for the homemaker. For example, and this again came up in the conversation yesterday, that let's say Subir or I, we make a paratha, it becomes a social media post. Whereas a homemaker has been making parathas for, 10, 15, 20 years and nobody has appreciated. But a man does a paratha or a Maggi or, make something and it immediately gets amplified as a fashionable thing to post on social media. So it is even creating some form of disrespect for the family members. If I'm lucky that I quit my role in the middle of the COVID crisis and I don't have back-to-back calls throughout the day. But imagine a family which has to walk around, tiptoe around the house in silence or walk around the house in silence because the wage earner is on a call throughout the day or through multiple calls throughout the day. So that whole fabric of what a home is gets broken. Respect for the homemaker's role gets destroyed. So it becomes extremely important for HR professionals to find new measures of figuring out the emotional, physical well-being, not only of the individual, but now even more important, the individual in the context of the home that they live in. So there are members in the family. Being cognizant of that fact and being respectful of that fact is an extremely important criteria. We all laugh at the BBC man who was giving an interview on BBC and his kids ran into the room. We found that cute, but we don't expect that as a normal way of working in this work from home environment because we are not attuned to understanding the man or a woman and the family within which that they operate. So the new definition of what we are looking at has to be the home as a unit as well, the family as a unit as well. So these will be the big shifts that will happen as a result of the new AC after COVID era. And these are big changes. Some of these are were due long time ago. So HR as an enterprise leader, it has always been the case. It was undermined, unfortunate, absolutely unacceptable. HR leaders, and I keep sharing this with my friends from the industry, that I see HR leaders as business leaders. And they should aspire to imagine their career trajectory as CEOs and business leaders and not as functional leaders. Because if you have the aspiration, then you start behaving and using that as a frame. So it's not about the seat at the table. It is HR deserves a seat at the head of the table. That's a new proposition that should be there. And imagine this crisis cannot be handled without HR's role in it. HR is about humans and robots. So a huge, strong bent of technology, automation, AI, all of that coming in is important. HR is a new marketing function. So differentiating your organization in the talent marketplace is the role of HR strategy. And finally, the app store experience is what HR technology. So HR will take the lead in technology. So it will be consumer tech, which human resources understands best, which then gets brought into the organization, not enterprise tech, which gets cascaded down to individuals. And finally, the lens or view of looking at people in the context of their families and understanding them from their mental well-being, physical well-being, and overall balance of the workplace and the home is going to be the new measure of which HR will focus on. So I just wanted to pause there and address any questions that are there.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions coming up here. There is one coming from Monica Srivastav. Monica, can you unmute yourself and ask the question directly if you want?
Hi, Devbrat. It was an absolutely fab conversation that we're having right now. So thank you for that. I think you have a lot of experience in what you're talking about, and everything that you said made a lot of sense. So thank you for that.
Thanks a lot.
The question that I have is the question that I have been pondering over for quite a long time right now. I heard a very interesting thing that you said, which was that human resources is about human plus robots, right?
Yeah.
So, I being a part of the training fraternity, for me, the human part is a very, very important part, as I understand. How do you see in your experience, do you think that the robot part is going to take over and the human element is going to lose the essence as technology takes over? What is your thought about this is my question to you.
Yeah. So see, I don't see the human part losing relevance, but getting far more anchored in doing what humans do better and letting some of the things which robots do better handed over to robots. And I'll share a very fascinating example. So in my role as innovation advisor, I have been looking at innovation in the human resources space because I come from the human resources consulting background. And one of the things that I started working on close to a year and a half ago is to build something which is for which the time has already come, but nobody was building that. See, and I'll explain that from a human and robots perspective. You're a learning and development professional. And let's say in the OD part of the organization also, there's an organizational development professional. And both of you put together are tasked with helping people manage their career aspirations. Now, we are used to the regular stuff about mentoring, coaching, career development programs, assessments, all of the gamut of things. And these are all very linear systems or processes. So for a mentoring or coaching conversation, you have to set up time, the coach needs to be available, you set up time, something else comes up, might not happen, gets postponed, and so on and so forth. How do you solve that? So now if you are tasked with both the human and robot part of it, you will start looking at saying that, is this better done, this coaching conversation or mentoring conversation better done by a human, or is a robot a good enough solution in this space? That gave rise to chatbots. So chatbots are very common. You go to any of the travel booking sites, you are actually talking to chatbots and not to humans, and you don't even realize it. Even on Messenger and almost everywhere you are talking to chatbots. We are familiar talking to Alexa and Siri, and these are conversational bots. So we started building a notion saying that career conversations are best done when people are taking a pause. So you're stuck in traffic, you're waiting for a meeting to start. If there was a chatbot which you could open, which could have a career conversation with you. So you make it absolutely non-linear. There is no time-space constraint on it. And those kind of solutions are available right now. So, and who informs them? So it's based on expert rules. So people actually say that if a person is, constrained by growth, then here are the 3 or 4 things that I would suggest that they look at. You can link in from the chatbot on career conversations, you can link it to learning and development resources. So in the next career move, your influencing skills could be very important. Would you like to start an influencing skills program? It's available. Click here. And it takes you into the L&D app, which then, schedules it. You are able to consume that content. So that's the world that we imagine when we look at humans and robots together. So I'm not saying that, robots will replace humans completely, but they will complement and supplement the humans with stuff which robots do very well, which is make it non-linear. Make it very enriching with rules and insights in the back end. So that's the kind of world that we are talking about.
Yeah, probably what I heard you saying was that it's the best of both worlds coming together and giving the best of the solutions is what I hear you saying.
That's right.
Thank you for that.
Good. Alok, can you just unmute and ask a question to Debu? Alok Ranjan.
Yeah. My question was basically the point which you are making is absolutely important, that the emotional aspect when there is a work from home happening is so very critical. But in our context and in our reality, the work from home has happened so sudden that infrastructure and people were not ready for it. And suddenly the people are confined to their 4 walls, living with the family. And on top of it, there is a work also which is getting carried away. And particularly where both the spouses are working, this is bringing a lot of emotional turmoil. So how do you suggest to deal with such scenario?
So very good question, and I'll just start with, so when I'm looking at you, I'm meeting you for the first time, and I see a stack of books behind you, and pretty neatly organized. So I start humans are designed to make shortcuts or guesses about other humans based on the visual cues or the audio cues that they get to see. So I'm already beginning to build an hypothesis of who you are, what kind of a person you are, and that's exactly what is likely to get impacted when everybody is working from home and everybody is a face on a screen, and the number of people who are there together on a call, if those become stamp size, then I'm losing emotional connect, or the people connect that I have in the workplace, that gets completely lost. And there is a small talk which will most probably get released today that I recorded. I'm a big fan of neuroscience, and I'm building a series on neuroscience and leadership, the connect with that. So I'll just share with you a very simple formula, which has been the bedrock of all the leadership development work that I do, is that leadership behavior is a function of the person and the situation. Okay, so it's actually a function of who the personality, so the psychometric, attitudes, mindset, all of that put together, and the situation that they're dealing with. So that's the standard definition of what a leadership behavior is. Now, it almost says that the person is given. So you put the same person in different situations, they behave differently. You put a different person in the same situation, they behave differently. But what neuroscience research tells us is that we use different parts of the brain for doing the analysis. And based on which part of the brain we use that analysis for, our decisions are very different. So there is a very interesting, famous example research, which is the trolley dilemma. So it's a very interesting experiment, and there is a lot of research which has gone into it. So there is a train track, and you're standing by the train track, and you see 4 people making repairs on the train track further down, 500 meters down. And suddenly you turn around and you see that there is a trolley which is coming at full speed. Its brakes have failed and you cannot stop it. But there is a side loop where if you use a switch, you can shift the trolley onto the side loop. But the problem is there is one person over there as well. So if you switch the trolley, it kills one person, but if you don't, it kills 4 people. So what will you do? People invariably decide that they will switch the trolley's track and sacrifice one person versus 4. Scenario B of that trolley dilemma is that it's the same scenario. The trolley is coming, 4 people on the railway track, but this time you're not standing next to the track. You're on top of a overhead water tank. And you realize that the only way to stop the trolley is that there is a person fat man standing next to you. If you push that fat man, he will fall on the track, and that can stop the trolley. So what do? Nobody wants to push the fat man.
Correct.
And the reason for it is that the moment the thought of touching somebody or pushing somebody is actually processed in the emotional side of the brain. Whereas the previous scenario, it was all processed in the logical side of the brain. So logically, you are able to take the decision of killing one guy and saving 4. But emotionally, you are not able to take the same decision, same scenario, same outcome, but you're not able to take the decision because you're processing it in a different side. So the more and more interactions become faceless, it will most likely start getting processed on the logical side of the brain. But,
absolutely.
But if you were to create the environment where, your family members walking in the background. So if I got to know that you had 2 children and your parents also lived with you, I would have a very different emotional connect with you. So we need to start imagining or accepting the fact that we are working from, and this is something which our wife told me. The other day I was on a video call and I said that, will you keep quiet? I'm on a video call. She said that everybody knows that you're at home. And if it is too quiet, they will feel that, it is an artificial situation. So be comfortable with the fact that this is home and there will be noise. So we have to start treating the work from home as defining home itself. What is acceptable as far as the home is concerned, and not try and impose the office norms onto the home front. So those will become extremely important. As HR professionals, it is for us to start making those suggestions or recommendations to other business leaders, saying that accept the fact that you'll see people in the background. Don't have unnatural expectations of the home environment.
No, so profound. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Good, good.
Thank you.
May I request Nidhi to ask the question she wants to pose to Debu?
Hi, Debrat. That was a very interesting discussion that we had. Now, my question, not just question, it's I'm getting inquisitive with regards to the gender dynamics with respect to work from home. That has been addressed by you as to how it has become more difficult. We as working professionals did not realize. Initially, it was like being at home and having more time for the stuff. But over the days, it has become really complicated for us, where it's becoming really very difficult. Work from home has become working at home continuously. And that is what is very stressful. So addressing individual life circumstances by the HR, how far can we expect that, where in the current scenario too, this had really not have been addressed by organizations. And with this complicated situation having come up, how do you visualize or foresee something positive happening?
Okay, so see, I have been running a very crazy experiment for 1.5 years now. So, which is that I don't set alarms, I accept all meeting invites, and I don't attend any of the conference calls. So, and it was a very simple rule, and I ran it as an experiment because of my interest in neuroscience, saying that if it is important enough, my brain will register it and I'll remember to, do it. If it is not, it will get, my brain will automatically put it in the background. I have realized in 1.5 years, and I was a partner in a Big Four firm, that 99% of calls which I forgot to attend because I did not set alarms, but I had accepted, nobody missed me. So 99% of calls, nobody called up saying that, Debu, where are you? We are waiting for you on the call. Never happened. Only in 1% people said that, Debu kaisa nahi hai, usko bula, pucho, join kar sakta hai kya? And I would only attend those calls where people actually called me or, followed up and made me join. The second thing is that our definition of what is priority for us and what is important for us is our definition, and it needs to remain that. If you let others define what is important for you, your life is going to turn into hell. And I use a very simple framework, important and urgent. So if you were to plot important and urgent on 2 axes, important, not urgent, urgent. So dealing with only that which is important and urgent should be your focus for the day. Anything which is not urgent but important, you can park it for later. Anything which is urgent but not important, you can actually palm it off to somebody in your team. And anything which is not important, not urgent, you should not be there on your to-do list. So managing your time is one of the most important leadership, self-goal, goal setting that you can do. And maybe if you have the freedom and luxury, don't join all the video calls or calls that come your way. See where you are missed. I realized I felt very unimportant initially because nobody bothered to even chase up and call me. But my life became so much better. I was far less stressed. I started remembering things. I used to earlier forget things. And it became a norm for me. So in the lockdown, I don't miss not having calls and stuff. This is the normal way of living for me for the last 1.5 years.
A matter of choices. How far can you go with avoiding calls? It's also a matter of choice, and also about how far the organization understands.
It's about you testing whether it is are you indispensable for that call? In India, we have a problem that we just like big gatherings. Not everybody is important in that gathering. So one of the tests is that to see if anybody is being missed in that gathering or not. That's the only way you can deal with the current problem that you're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dev.
Thanks. We have one question coming up from Dinesh Prasad. Dinesh, can you ask your question, please?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Debu, I think thank you for giving very interesting insights. It was really a lot of things which we came to know the new challenges are going to come up. One of these, I think you made a passing remarks, if I heard you correctly, that you said that HR can be the new face of, going to be the new face of marketing function.
Right.
I am a little more interested to know if you can elaborate with few examples.
Sure. So, let's say we were to take a FMCG company. Okay. Now, in FMCG company, one of the things that they do very well is understand consumer preferences, consumer trends, what happens in a household. So many years ago, before I became a management consultant, I started my career in advertising and market research. So for FMCG companies, it is important to research every single element before products are launched because it becomes very expensive. So I have done research of the perfume that goes into Surf Excel. So evaluated 6 or 7 different perfumes and figured out from that research which is the perfume that gave women a sense of a cleaner wash. So I have done that level of research. If I were an HR professional in a FMCG company, I will need to understand this consumer psyche because that's exactly what I will need in order to manage the workforce as well, because it's the same set of people who are coming to work. It's not a different, people from a different planet who turn up at work. So the ability to look at consumer research, consumer insights, consumer communication, to use technology or formats which works with consumers is the need of for the HR function as well. So if consumers like, let's say Twitter or short format communication, there's no point in writing a 2-page memo to employees. Then you need to be able to communicate your message in 140 characters, just like you do on Twitter. If long movies have given way to, episodic 30, 40-minute episodes, then you have to cut down town halls from 2-hour, 3-hour town halls into maybe 10-minute, quick gatherings, and so on and so forth. So that's what I meant by HR needs to be the new marketing function, because borrow concepts from marketing and implement it in human resource.
Okay. But whether marketing people will recognize you, they will not feel that unnecessarily you are getting
marketing people also are concerned about their career, their growth, their development. You are their best friend when it comes to that. So marketing will never underestimate HR, I can assure you that. Because at the end of the day, their annual increments, rewards, everything is in your hands.
True. So you need to understand business more in depth, more better, so that you can add some value.
So I'll give you one example. So marketing is always very conscious about costs. So and HR controls cost in a way that nobody realizes. So for every hiring, you have the ability to bring down the hiring cost or the cost of compensation, find talent from different pools, and be able to provide marketing with that benefit of looking at cost control in a different lens. So they will always find some value in the human resources function.
Great, thank you. Debu, I have one question which is very basic actually, but I want some clarity on that, because nowadays we are hearing a lot of onboarding happening, people joining virtually at various places and so on and so forth. And we also talk about organization values, vision, culture, all those kind of things. How are these going to be imbibed into the new people who are coming into the system, and how is it going to happen?
So see, I don't see onboarding as a discrete activity which starts at a particular point of time. And that goes back to the earlier question of HR as a new marketing function. So your onboarding exercise, and I'll use the best example of two best examples of onboarding. So you buy an Apple phone or you install the Uber app. How many steps does it take for you to start using the app or to start using the phone? That is the onboarding experience for me. We sometimes make it overly complicated because we assume a lot of importance for our role, saying, oh, this is important. They have to fill in 20 forms. They have to spend 1 hour listening to a leader talk. All of that is useless. I can only say that onboarding into an organization is the most useless set of activities that we can design. Onboarding is as simple as the moment there is a desire created in the employee to come and work for you. That is the most important onboarding that you can start with. And I was doing work for one of the steel companies which has manufacturing facilities in a very remote location in Jharkhand. I'll not name the company. But we started by saying that when you recruit diploma engineers, you give them an offer and 50% don't turn up for the onboarding. So what's the point of that onboarding exercise? You've lost 50% of the people that you offered. You need to start onboarding from the moment you hand them the offer letter. So onboarding is that you give them an offer letter, a week later you send them a form, you keep them engaged, then another form, then send them the train details, then send them a placard at the station to receive them. By the time they have landed up in your office, they already know the vision, mission, values, the history of the company. All of that is already sold to them. The onboarding doesn't happen on the day you need to start work or in the premises of the company. This is a great time to realize that onboarding could have started from the moment you made the offer.
Great. We have Khalid coming up with a question. Khalid, can you just ask your question, please? Unmute yourself.
Okay. My question was, does HR have a role in data security and IT security? Given it will become digital in future, as I heard you, what do you visualize? Or HR will depend on IT function totally for compliances?
See, the data security or IT security is the domain of the IT function. But you ask a very interesting question, saying that if somebody has a mindset of being very careless, so I don't know how many of you have seen that Netflix series where in this village in Jharkhand, they actually run these scams. They take the security pin and the credit card details and scam them. Now, if people are careless to indulge in those kind of activities and give away their credit card details, that's a risk not only for those as individuals, but for the organization as well, because they could give away so much of information about the organization. So while the tech side of the security is the IT organization's responsibility, the mindset of a secure, so what is security? Your personal data is important for you, your family, and for your own security, that becomes HR's role to inculcate that seriousness about protecting. I have, spent time talking to teams that I worked with, that when you're in a hotel or a public place, when you're taking notes in a conference, please do not leave paper with details on the conference table, because this is sensitive information. So that don't have a loud conversation about a project in an airport lounge or waiting for a flight or on a bus. Don't do that, because that's not a secure environment to do the conversation. So those mindset part of security becomes HR's responsibility. But HR's responsibility is also the fact that, not letting IT take security to such a level that it becomes impossible for somebody to, use technology, that you have to use a PIN. It's like those bank token, secure ID tokens, right? If you don't have it, you can't log in into your own account. So, and it becomes so difficult that it becomes frustrating, and it's an agitation just logging in into account. So not take it to the other extreme, but to define the user experience and maintain that, but also define the do's and don'ts and raise awareness around what could happen. Jamtara, yeah, that serial is Jamtara, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so not to let Jamtara kind of incidents happen, but not to make it a Fort Knox of sorts as well.
Great. Anybody else who wants to ask a question? Because it's 6 now and it's time to close.
I have just one final question, Debrat, if I can ask you that question.
Sure.
I have, I very well understand from, what you shared that HR is more about enterprise leadership and not functional leadership. As a part of the HR fraternity, I understand that. But, from your experience, how can I play as an HR professional an instrumental role in making it like an established fact to the larger organization? I know it's sad sometimes when you're not given the kind of importance that you really have in the system, but how can I play an instrumental role as an HR professional to establish that?
So see, there are, for a business leadership or enterprise leadership, there are 3 or 4 things which become extremely important. And, this is more or less defined from a functional lens as well. First of all, we need to understand that CEOs are not necessarily, the chief executive officer role does not come from a specific function. The chief executive officer is supposed to use all the functional leaders to drive the organization as per the board mandate. So the CEO is not a specialist. Therefore, to occupy the CEO's role, you have to stop believing that you're a specialist. That's one. Second is, what does it take to run a business? A good understanding of the markets, a good understanding of the resource or the supply side or the manufacturing capabilities, the decent understanding of financial, aspects, and some elements around technology, and regulation would be the fifth element. Honing your skills in those 4 or 5 areas over a period of time should be the only requirement for you to be able to have a conversation, to give leaders the assurance that, you will be able to perform that role. If the CEO was stuck in a location and somebody had to chair the meeting, would you be asked to chair the meeting? Preparing for that becomes extremely the simplest thing to do. And so you'll need to pick up some understanding or awareness around these 4 or 5 functions. And you already have deep skills on managing people, mindsets, leadership, all of those. So I would say that keeping it as simple as that is a basic requirement. Then putting yourself in roles or opportunities or projects where some of the skills are tested is the next step. And finally, it will take you maybe a couple of years of doing this before somebody will entrust you with the responsibility of leading some part of the P&L. And once you have done that, then the path to CEO is just natural.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So Devu, you've got a lot of good compliments, and I want to read them out, some of them. Nidhi writes, thanks a lot for this session. It made a lot of more sense than other sessions we have been attending, where a very generalist view has been discussed. I actually made interesting notes, great inputs. Alok says, I must say a great session. Thank you so much for such an insightful session delivered in such an impactful manner. And here is another one who has said, Monica, of course, has appreciated your session. There's Anurag who says, thank you, Dev, for your insights. And Rakesh Nandan telling that I attended a number of webinars these days, but none of them can match this one. That's excellent, Dev, over you.
Thank you.
Enlightened and enriched by the vast experience of Debrat sir. Thanks a lot. So thank you very much, Devu, for taking out time for us. And it was indeed very enriching, enlightening, and insightful. And we thank you. We have recorded the session and we'll share the links. And Devu, thank you very much.
My pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. I've never done this before, so it was my first experience, and really appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devu. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Amit.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Amit.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Subir. Thank you.